Eh, okay. All right. So a lot of yeah, this one is on. So all of the stuff we'll be talking now, we'll be talking in the air. But anyway, no problem. Right? So that is the thing. And to this one is okay. But okay, let me just do a little bit of rundown so that I have it on record. Right? You see. So what I was saying is you got two type of sources, primary, right, as well as secondary. So the primary is the one you gather specifically for your research objective. You've gone out to obtain the data by yourself, right? You can obtain such data through survey, observation, and experiment. We explained that yesterday. Then the secondary data, secondary source, is been done somewhere, right? We said it's data already gathered in previous research project by any organization, right? So where are the sources? Government publications or statistics or whatever, libraries, the university research paper like you see on my stuff, you see, we can go to a university website, dissertation thesis, then media statistics perhaps, then professional business association, any publications, internet, Google, Scopus, right? And any publications where you can be able to collect data depending on the type of research you are doing. Then here we're talking about the format of a questionnaire, right? In most cases, it's divided into two sessions. You have session A, the demographic section. This is where you collect personal information. Some people don't say demographics here, they say personal, right? It's the same. So where you ask somebody of the age, income level, but what I can tell you is this. This one, it depends on what your research objective is, right? Because there are some instances you don't need all these things, right? So when you know that you're gonna use this one to analyze your data that can help you to make informed decision, then you include it. For example, if you want to know the age of people, you want to know the age, right? We said this questionnaire is about customer satisfaction survey. You want to know the customer satisfaction, their level of satisfaction, either for your service or your product. If you want to know the age of people in terms of their customer satisfaction, then you can include the age, whereby you can be able to say, okay, the majority of the youngsters are not satisfied. You see, or most of the people that are saying they're satisfied with the product or with the service, you want to know their age bracket so that you can be able to design a program to enhance, to improve on whatever shortcomings that you might come across after analyzing your research information or your data. Does it make sense to you? Right. Then I said, when you've collected your data, you don't just have to start analyzing it. You must first of all look in to see whether it makes sense. There are some data that look messy. You need to clean those data, right? By, for example, having to check whether all questions have been answered, right? And whether it's readable, most especially when we're talking about readable, if somebody can, for example, if something that is written, right? Of course, if it is a 1, 2, 3, you can be able to read it. Are the answers accurate? Like I explained to you, sometimes some people don't look, they just tick it for you, just to please you, to chase you away, right? Some people do that. But when you got a kind of questionnaires, responses like that, it will not help you because the person didn't read. Right. Even myself, those days, I used to do like that, which is not good, highly unethical. Just take it, say take, right? Which is not right. Then, how consistent are the answers? Like I explained to you before, somebody says something is good, but you ask another question to confirm, a kind of confirmatory. Then the person is putting another answer. That means the person didn't read. So, something of that nature. Then, when you've done with that, you need to tabulate the data. You need to count, right? Right. Let me pause here and thank you for your observation. Otherwise, we could have just continued to be talking without registering what we are saying here, right? Yeah, I appreciate it. Keep it up. Right. Okay. So, tabulate the data. You know how to tabulate the data. You know what? You got, Excel spreadsheet, right? You know you can use Excel spreadsheet to draw what they call a bar chart, pie chart, and do analysis. Some people are using Excel spreadsheet. Nah? It's very, very important. Very nice because you can use it to do a lot of stuff. Excel. In Excel, if you know the formula, there are a lot of analysis, data analysis that you can do there. Very powerful. So you tabulate the data. How do you tabulate the data? You say the responses, you put it in one column. Then, for example, no, the questions in one column, then the responses on a different column, right? Then you can use your Excel tools to draw a kind of a bar chart. You count the numbers of answers in each category, you enter, right, the data into the system. Then you use the tools in Excel to draw a bar chart. You see the one that got the highest, right? You're going to see the bar chart the way it's been drawn, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? So now when you finish, you need to interpret it. How do you interpret it? Interpreting closed questions and interpreting open-ended questions. Okay, here I want to introduce you to two concepts now. There is what we call closed questions and open-ended questions. Right. The one we saw just now is closed. Right? Where you are given options. Options. You know what I mean by options? To make choices. To make your own choice. That one is closed. Right. In addition to the questions that have got options, sometimes you have some questions that are dichotomous. Now you're gonna say, I'm speaking big language. Dichotomous. Dichotomous means yes or no. Two. Die. Die means two. Cotomous. You got two choices. Either yes or no. Right? That is why we call it dichotomous. Dichotomous questions. Right? So when somebody poses a kind of dichotomous questions to you, it's either yes or no. Right? For example, like the customer satisfaction survey. Are you satisfied with the service? It's yes or no, right? But if there are certain things you want to express in terms of why you feel that you're not satisfied with the service, you cannot be able to write it there. You cannot be able to express it. Does it make sense to you? It means your hands are tied. Either you say yes or no. You cannot explain why. Do you understand? So that kind of a question, we call it a closed question. Does it make sense to you? And it's very easy to analyze. You count how many people say yes, you put there. How many people say no, you put it there. You can easily make an informed decision by saying the one that is highest, then you know quickly. 5 people say the service is okay, then 2 people say they're not happy with the service, right? Okay. The majority say they are happy with it, right? But when you need to look at those 2 that say they were not happy or they are not happy with the service. You need to find out why. You see, but when your questions are closed questions, are dichotomous, rather, or closed question, to say it simply, you will not know, right? That is why in some instances, when you do a kind of a survey, right, quantitatively, you need to explore it again, right? You need to ask for that question to say why. So from there you can be able to know. Because when you know that people, of course, you know that majority are happy with it. But there are few people that are not happy. Will you just leave them like that? You need to explore further to ask them why. You see, so when they provide their opinion now to tell you why they were not satisfied, that aspect is open ended. The question of why is an open-ended. Does it make sense to you? Right? So that is what we are referring to here. Now, let's read what we have here. Interpreting closed questions. This is relatively easy. Focus. This is relatively easy because very specific answers have been requested. Do you prefer health food to junk food? Then you count how many people, right? If 70% answer yes, it is very clear that the majority of students prefer healthy food. Okay, look at where you got a little bit of dilemma, right? Open-ended. Open-ended is not so easy to analyze, right? We analyze open-ended questions. We call it a qualitative analysis through a thematic process. We call it thematic process. I'd say that language will be a little bit higher than you now because I'm using the language that we use at varsity. Then, because this question allow for opinion, the researcher has to group similar answers together to develop themes. That is what we call thematic analysis. Yeah, thematic analysis. Such as people believing that junk food is bad for you. So, guys, I think we're gonna stop here, right? Then tomorrow, perhaps we're gonna talk on the research report.